infallible, and I have been in the security profession, if you will, for more than 16 years, and a pretty varied progression through my career. Nothing ever goes in a nice straight line. It always has some jigs and jags to it, and I began with a lot of play, right? Getting involved with systems and computers and understanding maybe how to game a bulletin board way back in the dark days. So you get around and you play and you learn how to turn that play and that fun into something that you can get a career in. So I turned that into practice, understood how I could help the companies that would hire me. I could help them understand how to deploy some of that technology, and learned how to really turn that into more sophisticated design that then somebody would want to hire me for to consult for them and create more sophisticated architectures and products and deploy technology. So I took that into a pretty broad understanding of what security could do, what networking does, and turned that into, again, a career in how to help businesses adapt and evolve, and how security was an enabler. So I wanted to see how that becomes a business outcome that I could affect. So that was where my career took me, and that's where I am today, as somebody who attempts to help organizations understand how security can be an enabler of their business. So one of probably the two things that I hope to convey today about, just as a brief introduction to who I am and what I do, is that data is really critical, and collecting data is important, but doing something with that data is really the goal. Understanding understanding that data and how to use it effectively to identify the risks, the vulnerabilities in your environment, how it affects the business, how they can enable new business or go after new business. So that's the real effect of gathering the data and doing something with it. It's not just about collecting it. And a lot of organizations that I've been involved with spend too much time just allowing that data that they collect to sit and gather dust. So you got to really do something with that data, make use of it, make a process out of it, and it'll pay its dividends. But the second thing that I would want to leave you with, and I'll continue to discuss, is that security is everyone's responsibility. So I'm a security practitioner, a professional, and we have others around, and this is what we do day in, day out. But the awareness within the organization, and every person is responsible for it, right? Every person whether they're somebody doing reception or somebody doing development of a web app, every person is responsible for security, for the intellectual property of that organization. So everyone's responsible for it. So just like I mentioned, it's what you do with the data that's important. So successful security practitioners, they constantly review how they're analyzing the data that they get, the process involved with analyzing that data, and the people. Right? You can't over-invest in the individuals that you have that are analyzing the data and coming up with an understanding of the overall posture of an organization. Every day, Cisco has a number of people and technology and process built around analyzing the security data that it receives. And it receives a lot of data every day. So it's important that they analyze it and understand, what's coming in and out, what's the risk of that coming in and out. Right? So always question what you're doing. Never trust that the process that you built is working and it's effective and it's truly, the end. You're never at the end. You're always reviewing what you're doing and analyzing and understanding, is this the best that we could do? Are we being the most effective? So go back, revisit it. And finally, and this is something that probably goes outside of just security, but you get what you measure. In other words, I could set up all the greatest policies and procedures, but if I don't measure any of that, I have no way of proving if any of it's being effective, if that makes sense. So please, always measure what you have. And this last one on the list, I think, is probably one of the most important. Just copy what is working. Right? If somebody else has come up with something that works for them, and you think it can be effective for you, copy it. Give them credit, right? But it's worth copying and sharing amongst each other, because you want to be able to be the person that also goes back and shares and allows somebody else to copy what you've done. A couple of other comments. It's not the users and the technologies necessarily that are really the problem. It's complexity. We have over-engineered many of our networks out there in the industry, and there's probably just so much to look at and understand, and it just feels like you're trying to climb that mountain, or you know, the ant trying to eat the elephant. But how's the saying go? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, right? So you just got to get started. It looks complex, it looks overwhelming. Take the first step, get started. You know, start understanding what your data looks like and how you can analyze it. And again, analyze the data. Just, you know, it doesn't serve you to have an emotion, a feeling about what's going on in your network or what's going on with the data or where your intellectual property lives, because you'll always miss something. Analyze it. Get a second pair of eyes on it. Make sure you spend a lot of time reviewing your processes and question what you're doing. And I think this is the bottom statements are pretty interesting. And I stole these slides, by the way, because I shamelessly copy where I find good things. And I think this is interesting. I have a series of questions, and the data gives the answers, or I don't know the questions yet. Let's look at the data and see if there's something in there that's of interest. Okay? So that, again, it's questioning what you're doing every day. Make sure you're analyzing the data. I like this as a final closing slide. Just give you a chance to look at that. Our adversary only has to be right once. This is how we have to treat our networks. Be vigilant, right? How do you protect your data? It's being vigilant every day, because there's probably 5, 10, 20 people managing the risk to the environment that you're in, the network that you're in, but there's 10,000 people out there trying to knock the door down, right? And only one of them has to get through for you to lose your intellectual property as an organization, or to risk losing customer data, or like I discuss work with the public sector quite a bit, and you don't want to divulge privacy information about your constituency either. Right? That's just the same thing. That's your customer data if you put it in either context. So always stay one step ahead. Question what you're doing. Analyze the data. Those are my messages for today. And I'll pass the ball, if you will, to your next speaker, Thomas. Come on up.
All right, thanks, Dominic. I'll try to make my presentation as professional as the one from Dominic. So, a little bit about me. So, as you can see, and probably realized by now with my accent, I'm not an Australian-born citizen. So, I was basically born in Austria, had an engineering degree in telecommunications. Back in those days, there was nothing really much talk about network security or even the network itself, which is not really that long ago, but the internet was basically just in its infancy back then. I then started to work for a network integrator in Austria, deploying multiplexers, switches, routers, and those kind of infrastructure devices. Afterwards, worked in South France for a previous competitor from Cisco, again on the customer support side, mainly for networking infrastructure. And finally, in the year 2000, I moved to Australia and joined Cisco, again as a senior support engineer. But as you can see, I actually didn't really start with network security itself until about 10 years ago, so I'm kind of a newbie compared to Simon and Dominic here. So why did I come to network security or security in general? It was actually, in my case, not an immediate interest, but more like a how should I say, a way out of the work what I did previously. I was basically kind of working on infrastructure out of switches for a long time, and I felt this was kind of mainstream. And to be honest, who these days likes to be mainstream? Everybody likes to be a bit different, right? So back then, security was still a bit, I would say, an unknown territory for a lot of people. So if you could configure a firewall, you were kind of the man. And I like to be the man sometimes. And another reason, for instance, similar to this Macintosh, Appleverse, Windows users. Macintosh users used to be the ones that try to be special and have a bit too much money in their pocket. So I'm one of those ones as well. So yeah, I basically came across to network security more by trying to do something different and non-mainstream. What I'm doing at Cisco, so at the moment I'm part of the worldwide security borderless network practice, which is a team of security consultants and basically working to analyze, design, and build and deploy customer networks specific for Cisco security products and solutions. So a couple of key engagements over the last 10 years so that they kind of get a feel of the variety some of us have in their day-to-day jobs is I was involved, again, based on the services we offer in design and implementations primarily in the Asia-Pacific market. We're talking about Malaysian International Airport, government agencies, other airlines, banks all across Australia and Asia, helping to prepare some of the networks for the Beijing Olympics, R&D facilities in Taiwan, Philippines, stock exchanges, data center build-outs for Australian retailers and government. So as you can see, there's a big variety, and this is really just, I would say, network-centric. So in a profession of security, you can obviously go beyond those things and work for federal police, government institutions who do really trying to track attackers and cybercrime, for instance. So the possibilities are not limited to just network security as such. Why any one of you would choose network security? So there's many reasons. Maybe it's a reason for you again to be non-mainstream. Maybe you try to be different. That's one reason. Another reason is all companies today, doesn't matter if it's small or large, their business really relies on the network, on the internet. So the business wouldn't exist without the network. So there's a lot of emphasis on keeping that network running, and security goes hand in hand with that. Human interaction, what we mean by that is that even societies beyond the business concept itself, we are so relying on the network itself to communicate with other people all around the world on a personal and private basis. So in that sense, the network becomes even more important as well on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't matter if it's for personal or business reasons. People these days, they put a lot of trust into the network itself, and they basically assume the network is there, the network is up and running, and the network is secure. And there's still a general perception that all the bad stuff that happens out there is a bit like smoking, right? We read all these packages about getting cancer, and everybody knows it's bad, and I'm personally not smoking, but I'm just saying, we know it's bad, but generally a smoker has the perception that all the cancer and all these bad things happens to other people, but not to oneself, and it's a bit like that with network security. Customers a lot of the times think, other banks' networks get hacked, but not my bank until it happens. But the truth is, network security is now an essential part, and luckily we have laws in place in many countries where companies are forced to do something about network security. The big challenge you will face is probably still to convince customers and also end users to see security as an essential part, because with a few exceptions, security itself is not generating any revenue for customers. So it's a cost to an organization to make a network secure, and as such you will always have a bit of convincing to do to invest in security, whether that be for staff like yourselves or for equipment, and these are the kind of things you need to expect. So Other things that you can expect is it will never get boring, basically. So things change all the time. You know, attacks change, architectures might get optimized and changed, challenges change. So it's never a boring job as such. You also have to be realistic. So while every one of us should aim for 100% security, there's no such thing unless you disconnect and power down all equipment from the internet. That's 100% security. Everything in between is basically accepting the risk or mitigating the risk and doing something about it to lower the risk. So in organizations, it's a balancing act between accepting a risk or investing a certain amount of money and effort to mitigate that risk, but the risk will always be there to some extent. On the upside, you know, I see it also as job security, because nothing's always secure, and there will always be more people out there trying to exploit something, and that provides job security for us. So, you know, it will always be required. And it's a constant change and learning experience. So in that aspect, it keeps it interesting. Like with most things in the IT industry, you have to keep learning. Probably the key takeaway I would like to get across for you guys is that network security may be viewed as something on the side from a lot of customers and people, but as Dominic said, it's a responsibility from all of us to contribute to it, because the prime issue is still that the end user, the majority of end users are uneducated when it comes to how the internet works, about the risks, about the pitfalls, and I would say if everyone would be well educated in that aspect, would be less ignorant and sometimes even, I would say, less stupid in a sense, we wouldn't have all these problems. You know, people like us wouldn't be necessary. But as with the smoking and the other things we said, the general perception is other people's credit card gets hijacked, other people's Facebook account gets hacked, it's not mine, until it happens, and then, oh, you know, the scream and what can we do about it. So, you know, I would say education from the wide end user base is a very important component, and as we know, there's a lot of joblessness around the world, and one way that all these things are interconnected and make use of this situation is that, as you know from other continents, people try to exploit, you know, the goodwill and the trust people like us have in the internet and in businesses, and that's what they're trying to exploit. So, you know, in a sense, if you work in this industry, you can do something good to improve the usefulness of the internet and basically guarantee its initial intent to, you know, to be of good use and not be just a machinery to help crime get bigger and bigger. In that sense, I believe that was my last slide. I'm handing over to Simon.
Good afternoon all, and good morning to the people in India. So about myself, I've been in the industry about 18 years, roughly, give or take. And when I started, the security industry was, I suppose, an industry that was extremely small. And the professionals in the industry at the time, you did everything. And so I've been involved in absolutely all aspects of information security at one point in time. And I mean, these are from incident monitoring, response, doing forensics, risk assessments, looking up, coming up with designing, doing architecture, you know, and managing, you know, firewalls and all that sort of stuff. These days, I work in architecture. I'm an internally focused person, so I work for Cisco, looking after Cisco stuff only. I'm not a salesperson at all, so in architecture, we're trying to solve complex business problems. We're trying to enable new business models in a secure manner. Always the business is trying to collaborate and communicate and engage and expand and do different things and things differently all the time, trying to innovate. And in order to do this, we need to enable the business via security to actually achieve what they need to do whilst lowering risk. I mean, there's always going to be risk, But what we do is enable that by designing systems that are both usable and achieve the business's goals, while still enabling them to do it, with relatively low amounts of risk. I started off as an engineer, mechanical engineer of all things, and it was at university I got introduced into the world of computers. I mean, I had Apples and things like that beforehand, but it was when my first exposure to a Unix operating system, and that's sort of where my curiosity really got hold of me. Curiosity is a pretty strong driver. It's what led me. I needed to know how stuff worked, and getting into the nitty-gritty of sort of how these systems worked and that sort of thing was really sort of my first step down that particular path. And hacking as it originated was just about individuals that wanted to know more. People that wanted to sort of see what NASA were doing, or these days it's a bit more of an industry. Thomas mentioned that earlier, but there is a massive industry around it. I mean, it's highly segmented, specialised industry. It's quite astounding, actually, at how well organised it is. But I think that desire to know how stuff works is very important. I mean, you need to understand at all layers how things work. And by way of an example, I threw up a little QR code there. This is, to most people, that's probably just like a barcode, and something that some of you may have scanned. But it is, if you actually look at how these things work, it can be used to force, to open up malicious malware sites. And more importantly, this particular code can carry approximately 1.2 kilobits of data. That's 10 times more data than the smallest virus available today. So these things can actually be, I mean, once you actually understand how it works, it could be a potential threat vector. Well, it is a threat vector. So Bruce Schneider's a very well-known person in the security industry. And these quotes that I've got from him are quite old. But back then, this particular quote is stating that, security is not a point product. It's not about deploying an internet firewall and off you go. It's not about, saying, oh, we've got an IDS, therefore we're sorted. Security is a process. It's full end-to-end architecture and multi-layered. Oops. And so we talk about defence in depth in the industry, and what we mean by that is that you need at every single point, every single node, everything, from the endpoint to the switch to the router, all the way, to the host, data center gateways, all of these types of things, they all need to be secured at every step along the way for a secure solution. And at the same point, the data itself must be secured. So you need to look at the data layer and each layer of the OSI stack all the way down. And there's also, not only are you sort of trying to secure different layers, but there's often more than one tool for the same job. And I've used an example here of NetFlow. NetFlow is an important part of security monitoring. We use multiple products internally to parse and analyse our NetFlow data for different parts of the business. So we might use NetQuas to manage our availability and bandwidth management, Arbor, for our DDoS prevention and those sorts of things, and Lanco for security analysis. So that we've got more than one tool to actually that affect, at a 10,000-foot view might be doing the same job, but we're using them for slightly different purposes. And they're all very important in sort of analysing an incident, which can be quite complicated these days. So another Bruce Schneider quote. So the user's going to pick the dancing pigs over security every time, and this is in reference to sort of dancing banners and things like that and malware on internet websites. And it's true, you can't control users' behaviour. And the other two speakers have already talked about that education is very important. but there's always going to be someone that does something wrong. And so when we talk about defence in depth, we're talking about trying to control what happens, you know, their pathway. So when they do something wrong, what the actual effect of that is to the enterprise, to the system, to whatever it is you're trying to protect. The network itself is the network itself is I suppose one of the key pieces to the puzzle. There are many stages along the network that you can actually introduce the levels of security. And so some of the big things that I'm working on at the moment. So we have our borderless architectures, bring your own device, and data center virtualization and cloud utilization. All of these problems have huge components that we rely upon the network to actually provide the security. Whether it be, you know, the TrustSec solutions, to actually manage what gets access to the network, to the capabilities of the switches themselves, all the way through the network. So understanding what the network can do for you and understanding how to secure the network are very, very key pieces, certainly in my job. Not sure why this is so slow. Anyway, I'll hand over to Colin now. He's in the US, so he'll be on the WebEx meeting. Thank you.
Hi, Colin. Are you there? I think we've lost Colin. Just a moment.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Thanks for joining us all the way from the US.
Yeah, it's nice to catch up with everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be with the rest of the team in Sydney this afternoon, which is my normal port of residence. Again, like some of the other panellists, I'm not native to Australia, so I think that you'll actually hopefully take on board from that it's a truly international field and that there are many, many ways to actually start to engage in the opportunity that this industry provides us all now and moving forward. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit of my background and also some perceptive some of my perceptions on what the future may hold for us all. So, a little bit about me. I was born in the UK, and I actually didn't make the move here to Australia until some 5 years ago. My background was very much someone who was interested in maths and sciences as I went through initial education phases, but I actually moved into more of a business specialisation when I went to university, and very much took on a further interest in the whole sales and marketing piece. But that interest in technology was something I could never escape, and I was lucky enough to work with IBM during my time at college, and from there decided to pursue a career very much in the high-tech industries. I had a journey that's now some 25 years plus long in the IT sector, but it wasn't until about 1996 that I really got into the security environment, and that's somewhere that I've actually focused on and found as an area of specialisation ever since. So I suppose compared to Dominic and Thomas and Simon, my route into the industry has been through a different path, but nevertheless, I still find this one of the most exciting and fulfilling career environments that I think that anybody could wish to actually get involved in today and moving forward. So, where am I at the present time? I'm part of a team in Cisco that's known as the Borderless Networks team. I'm a peer of Dominic's. We all work for a reporting line that takes us up into the Asia Pac, Japan and Greater China segment. And my particular focus areas is in working with our partners to help them develop bigger and better security practices, but also to work with predominantly the service provider segment to look at what our telecommunications providers and our web services providers need to do to make sure that the services they are delivering to us are safe and secure and always available. So some of the customers that I work with are the likes of Telstra, and more recently here in Australia around the government-funded initiative to deliver a fibre-to-the-home network known as the National Broadband Network. Some of the things that I have been involved in recent times is that at present I still represent Cisco on the IT Security Expert Advisory Group. That is part of the Australian Government's Trusted Information Sharing Network, otherwise known as the TISN. And the group meets on a quarterly basis to help plan and provide expert advice to our critical infrastructure businesses and industries. So that's very much around the utility sector, so power, gas, water, but also some of the major industries on which we depend for our everyday lives, whether that be banking and finance, whether that be telecommunications or transportation. I've also been very lucky to be part of a team that work with Telstra around something called Project Enterprise. And I continue to actually have everyday engagement with that particular customer of Cisco's. And it's actually the key reason why I'm here late at night in an office in San Jose, because we've actually had that customer here with us for an executive briefing session today. And to set out about how security is very much shielded from some of the changes in the industry at the present time is that one of the attendees today put forward that he had to make $70 million of budget savings next year. But at the same time, the CISO that reported to him actually is getting an increase in the budget that he actually has at his disposal. So that continues to show that security is seen as a key developmental area for many organisations, and that isn't just happening in telecommunications, it's actually happening in finance, it's happening throughout the utility sector, that customers are looking at new ways to defend their networks and data assets. And one of the key outcomes of that is the necessity to actually invest in people and skills. And so for those of you that are considering a move into this industry as a career, your skills are going to be very much in demand if this is a path you decide to tread as part of an extension from working with the network academies. The other things that I've actually been exposed to in recent times is that I was also invited to work just over 12 months ago as part of a course advisory committee with the North Sydney Institute of TAFE. And that was very much to look to establish a new Bachelor of IT degree course in network security. And I was lucky enough then that actually made it through the process. They are just actually working on their first student intake, and as part of that, myself and a number of peers in the industry were invited to actually present at a recent open evening. And it's very much the topic of that open evening, which was the future of network security, that I'm going to focus on in the next few slides. So what is the future? Now, are we talking about a doomsday scenario? Are we talking about an opportunity for people like yourselves who are studying still at the present time? Or have we got an unstoppable wave? For those of you who perhaps might not be familiar with the historical figure on the right of the screen. That is King Canute, who actually thought that he could command the seas and that if he actually told the waves to stop, they would stop. Well, we're actually in an environment now where the real opportunity is to surf the wave. We are lucky to live in the era of Web 2.0. There are many new tools and technologies that continue to stretch us all and our imaginations through the introduction of tablets, greater mobility through the pervasive availability of different wireless and cellular networks, through to social media and new ways to interact with each other utilising the backbone of the internet. So there is a massive, massive growth opportunity for the IT industry, but with that we actually need to continue to defend and make those things available. And talking about tablets, a lot of people in the industry believe that these new mobile devices pose greater risk to them as an organisation. My colleagues may actually take a slightly different view to myself, but in many aspects, the actual threat vectors don't change. They merely actually transfer across to a new platform. A malware variant on an Android device is a malware variant. It could just as easily be actually on a PC or an Apple Macintosh. Are we likely to lose data off those devices? If proper controls aren't put in place, you will do. But if I lost my laptop that I'm sitting on at the moment and that laptop wasn't properly protected, the data wasn't encrypted, then the same possibilities of losing corporate assets exist for the old media as they do for the new media. So sometimes the press themselves whip up hype around particular problems, but many of the things that we see today are things that we've seen before. They're just sometimes in a slightly different form factor. But what we are learning is that it actually isn't possible to remain secure. The people that we are trying to compete with are well funded, they are very, very well resourced, and there are a significant number of holes that exist for them to actually exploit in most organisations. And so organisations like Cisco and the team that Simon works for, whilst we actually do everything that we can still to keep things out, we also actually take a view that we are going to be compromised and that we are very much now looking for what's exiting the company. We actually want to make sure that those intellectual property, the actual IP that Cisco uses to build its new products, to actually deliver solutions and services to a huge cross-section of customers across the globe, that we actually keep our systems safe and available, and that we can continue to serve those customers appropriately no matter what is thrown at us. So the general view of the industry right now is that three types of organisations now exist. One that has been compromised, one that's been compromised but doesn't know it, and if you are lucky enough, one that is about to be compromised. As Thomas actually said, the only way to stay safe and secure is to shut down all your systems, turn the power off, cut the communication cables, and send everybody home. And that's not a real viable business model for anybody to actually deal with. Hence, we're living in a world now, it's about degrees of insecurity. That isn't a particular issue. It just means that as a business, it's the responsibility for Dominic and myself in our roles to try and help people actually understand that that is the case, and then to bring in that deeper level of knowledge and expertise that we actually get from Thomas and from the Simons of this world to help people actually understand exactly what risks that people face, to mitigate those to an appropriate level. And the business then will accept the residual risk that is left behind, because it isn't possible to take that down to zero. At the same time, Dominic touched on education, and that it's the responsibility of us all to actually keep on communicating and educating everybody. And one of the challenges that I foresee is that if we keep on doing the same old thing time after time, why should we expect a different outcome? And that's pretty much what most people define as insanity. So the scale of the problem that we are dealing with around malware is growing exponentially still. In the first 10 months of 2011, some 38 million new hash binaries were seen. There's only 111 million in existence. Now, most people, if they do the math, that works out at about 700,000 a day. So, let me pose you a little question. If you did really, really well in your exams, whether it be that you're studying for a degree or whether you're studying for diplomas or studying to actually get skills under the Network Academy, if you got 95%, you'd probably think you were doing pretty well. I know back in my day I would do. But if a product like antivirus is only 95% effective, and some aren't even that effective, then what you actually have to consider is how many pieces of malware might slip past that piece of code that most people believe keeps them totally secure on the internet. So it's not to say you don't use the internet. It's not to say that we actually have to run scared. But what we have to appreciate is that no tool is infallible out there, and that we actually have to approach things with diligence and thought in what we do and how we do those things. So where to from now? We have to get back to the basics and do less well. An awful lot of you who are studying may or may not have actually really delved into the languages and the programming of the way that systems and software is built today. That is a fundamental tenet on which any IT security expert will actually base their knowledge and their ability to understand what our adversaries are trying to actually do at the present time. Dominic, freely actually said he actually was a plagiarist with some of the slides, and I know exactly where he got them from because I use them quite often too. They come from our own Chief Security Officer, John Stewart. And we actually have a responsibility to everybody to share our ideas and do that publicly. Something today that peers of Simon's we did actually here with Telstra in the United States. The Cisco Security Incident Response team spent time with the Telstra team to talk exactly what Cisco's doing using the tools and the systems that we use in the fight to keep our house in order and safe and secure. Dominic also touched about data, knowing what you need to protect and what its condition is in real time. That and instrumenting for detection generates huge volumes of data. In fact, in a network like Cisco's today, it actually generates somewhere around 750 gigabytes a day. The data repository that we actually have built and that generally is mined for threats and problems within our own organisation now amounts to some 40 terabytes. That takes highly skilled people who continually train and keep their skills up to date. And that team, again, is growing as we continue to deal with the challenges that we face as an organisation, never mind me sitting here in Building H, which is home of the Cisco development organisation focused on security, building new products and services for Cisco to take to market. And time after time, report, and measure that effectiveness. The bottom line of all of this is that hopefully those of you who've joined the session today, you're now on a journey to join us. We four are just a small representation of the industry at large. There is a rich and rewarding career awaiting all of you should you decide to tread that same path with us and come and join the side that fights for the like against the dark forces of the underworld who try to subvert some of the things that happen on the world of the internet. So thank you for joining us today. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we're now going to throw things open for a few questions, predominantly for myself actually asking my peers back in Sydney how they actually do and how they interact with certain things and what further advice they can provide you as you look to actually head out on this journey in the world of IT and network security.
So Colin, we're here and we're ready for your questions.
So Simon, I'm actually going to start with you first. What do you see are the typical challenges that are being seen by the Cisco internal IT team today? What are the things that your peers are challenged with day in, day out?
So I suppose the two parts to that particular question. One is, I suppose, what's referred to as advanced persistent threat. So the advancement of malware and threats and the way in which companies are attacked today, and combining that with bring your own device. So we're doing a lot. Most of our security monitoring budget these days are going into deploying more and more systems to do monitoring and getting, I suppose, more and more data, being able to drill down and actually monitor specific connections, understanding, transactional security, and getting into those sorts of things, because advanced persistent threats are popping up everywhere. I mean, they've been around for a very long time. A good example is Nortel was recently announced that they'd been attacked and had people, malicious users on their network for, I think it was 20 years or something, somewhere around that realm, that they didn't know about. These days, the malware and the directed attacks are very individually focused. They pick on individual users, individual systems. There's a lot of background knowledge that they already have. So for us, reacting to that is very critical. And at the same time, the business is migrating into areas such as the bring your own device. And it's not so much, as Colin says, not so much about the device themselves, but for many organisations, it represents the end to a standard operating environment. You're losing control so much or a lot of control of the endpoint itself. So you don't necessarily have encryption on the device. You don't necessarily have, the antivirus, the CSA, any of the particular tools that you might want on a particular device to protect the information while it's stored there. So we're having to come up with ways of dealing with that look at the way the information flows, controlling where the information resides, controlling what devices can have information on them. And that's probably the biggest challenges, combining those two.
Fantastic input, my friend. And Dominic, over the past sort of like week to 10 days, we even saw that the CIA again had problems with their own website from Anonymous. So does that show that no matter how deep your pockets, you've still got to be diligent? And also, does it mean that there are specific differences required in approaching the federal sector versus the commercial sector?
So I'll comment on that to say the CIA hasn't told me much, but also to say that just like Simon described, advanced persistent threats means that organizations like the CIA are continual targets to attack, right? So they are perpetually targeted, and it's the description, a native description of an advanced persistent threat. So because they're always under target from attack, there's an increased responsibility for the CIA to be diligent, and that's just the CIA. It could be any public sector organization. They realize, I think that part of the difference between a public sector organization and a commercial company is that they realize that they're always a target, And part of the reason, it could be something to do with a political vendetta. It could be a stance taken by the government for how it does foreign relations. It could be just any number of things, but I think that most governments understand that they are always a target. A lot of commercial entities don't understand that, but yet they probably are. So Cisco realizes that we're always a target because we make some of the products that help you defend your network. So, you know, it would be perfect for Anonymous to be able to come up and say, hey, I've stolen your intellectual property that makes your products work. They would love to do that and be able to publish that and say we've defeated, you know, the defenders. But I would say that, you know, we are very diligent. I think Simon would agree. So that helps us defend our networks. You know, organizations like the CIA, they may have had a defacement, but I wonder, and I would suspect, that they probably haven't lost anything that's really of substance, if that makes sense, right? So you might let the little things go in favor of protecting the really important things, and that's a conversation, that's a balancing act that happens all the time.
Thomas, turning to you. Again, you've got quite a few people in the audience in front of you, and obviously a lot more people online. So, what base skills would you like to call out that, you know, these next generation of security architects and consultants, what should they focus on? What are the base skills that they should get right to actually look forward to a long and healthy career in security?
Well, I think I rolled up a few things that I thought of in the last 10 minutes, and I think a lot of the skills are not necessarily for security specific itself, and they're actually quite basic. So the first thing I would say is don't be afraid. You basically need to lead by example, and along the way, you know, you basically consider to be non-mainstream by being advocate of network security and protecting things. Another advice would be make lots of friends, because along the way you might lose some of them, but don't worry, later on they will come back and thank you for protecting them from potential hijacked bank accounts, Facebook accounts, credit cards, etc. So, you know, all of those things, what I'm saying is don't see this as a negative, it's just something I personally come across. Another thing is feel comfortable of being a bridge. You will working in corporate environments, you will be acting as a bridge between the business, between security teams, between application teams, people who publish services, and you will generally always be questions whether your security measures and your advice is really necessary, because overall, as a security person, you will be seen as a hindrance to the business, as a hindrance to users, right? Because security should be transparent to the end user, customers, end users, etc. Every one of us doesn't want to be, you know, bombarded with 10 different pop-ups to say you're going to do this because otherwise you're not secure, you're going to do that, and you install this application to block that bad content, right? So you're basically fighting against those things a little bit sometimes. Other things is you don't need to be concerned about fashion, right? Some of you might think if you're a security expert, you might have to wear a black t-shirt saying I love SSH version 2, or a shirt with a pig head saying I advertise for Snort RPS systems. You know, as look at us, you know, we're not one of those people, so that's not a problem. Lead by example. Starts already with your family, friends, kids. You know, I try to brainwash my kids about social networks, about things not to click when they get an email, etc. And if you think in a bigger context, if every one of us does this educational work, it might potentially save millions of dollars around the world, and that basically means for the bad guys, the business becomes less lucrative, and in that sense, doesn't mean we need to do not such a good job of security, but you know, the more people do stupid things and click on things and getting their accounts hijacked, the more people may look into the business, because it's easy to sit somewhere in an internet cafe on another continent and basically trying to get credit card details and buy whatever you like with them. So education starts at home.
So Thomas, thank you for that.
Sorry.
We've only got a few minutes left, and there's a couple of other quick questions I actually wanted to try and get in. So again, a quick one for Simon. Recently, we saw about the conviction of a student hacker in the UK for compromising Facebook. So, what's your advice with regards to do grey hats make good security professionals?
Good question. I think that it's pretty hard to generalise in that particular statement. I think that with grey, there's different shades of grey, and I believe that all security professionals must follow a code of conduct. You can't be someone that just hacks things and releases 0 days and that sort of stuff. Working with vendors, working with clients, that sort of stuff. Achieving your notoriety through I suppose official channels is what I would recommend. I've had the pleasure of knowing many grey hats that work in the security industry over the years, and some are great, but then there's the odd bad one that can do a little bit of harm. So
responsible disclosure is the way forward.
Sorry?
Responsible disclosure is the way forward then.
Absolutely.
So guys, again, we've only got a couple of moments, so if we can just actually have a quick wrap up and a very quick, what's your top tip for somebody who actually wants to join and engage in this industry? Dominic?
Okay. Top tip is to study. Right? I mentioned play, and I say study, but what does study really mean? Get on your computers, read, play around with code, try to learn a new programming language. There's so many resources out there. It's just amazing how many free resources there are that you can go out there and you kind of play around with, right? And when you know how a web application works because you've developed one, you know how to defend that web application. You know where the security risks are and the holes are. Get out there and play around with stuff.
Thanks, Dominic. Thomas, what about you? What's your top tip?
My top tip would be, yes, study, but also think about specific areas of network security, what you might be interested in, because simply the industry and all technologies, they are too broad that you can cover everything. You can't know everything. If you enjoy being specialized in the field, look at the bigger concept first of what's all involved. As we said, security is a process, it's end-to-end. It entails policy, products, technology, to make up a complete security solution. So understand the bigger picture first. It will really help you to then say, I'm really interested more in this particular area later on, where you can then do more detailed work in that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. And Simon, a closing comment from you? Your top tip?
Nothing original from me. I'm going to echo Dominic's statements. I think that get your hands dirty. Get access to. I know there's different programs for getting access to Cisco gear. Get access to, install Unix, install. Get hold of OS X. Get different devices. Play about with them. Understand how things work. That's definitely my recommendation.
Guys, thank you very much for your time. I think you stay on for those people who are live in Sydney and take a few more questions live from the floor. For other people, I believe that things will transfer across onto Facebook, and I'll let Emma wrap on that. But Emma just put up probably the top tip for you all to take away, and that is make sure you study for your CCNA in security with the Network Academy. And with that, we'll sign off from Sydney, from WebEx, and from me in San Jose. Thank you for everyone for joining, and we hope that you've enjoyed this session with a panel of specialists from the Cisco team. Speak to you soon.